Explain the legal background behind today's announcement from the Attorney General's office is John Sipos. He is an Assistant Attorney General for New York State. Thank you very much for your time tonight. I appreciate it.
Liz, thanks for having me over today.
Okay, so this is complicated, but basically, what from my understanding is that your office, for several years now, has been asking the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to please consider seismic activity, of which there is more than we thought in this area of Indian Point, when considering whether to relicense, and they have said no.
That's correct, Liz. For the past 4 years, the Attorney General's office has steadfastly asked the federal regulator, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or NRC in their jargon, to look at the seismic hazards posed at Indian Point. And in fact, for all 3 facilities there, there are 3 units: Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3.
And each of those is a reactor, right?
Each of those is a reactor. 2 of them are operating reactors. The third is no longer operating, but it plays an important, critical role in the facility. That is Unit 1.
And so do they say, when they say no, and obviously nothing is easy. I mean, we're talking about the letter that was sent today from the Attorney General's office is 4 pages long, just over 4 pages long. So when they say no, we don't want to do that, do they explain to you why?
They haven't really. There have been a number of attempts by the office, detailed attempts, to lay out the record, the concerns that the Attorney General's office and the state has had. And there really has not been a substantive, meaningful response from the federal regulator.
And it just keeps actually escalating. I mean, just take out for a second the issue of Japan, which of course has brought this to the forefront. But there is not 1 but 2 faults, which is new since 2007-8 about, right?
That's correct. There are scientists at Columbia University's Lamont Doherty School, and they have determined, as a result of a lot of examination, that there is a second fault that runs from Stamford, Connecticut, roughly up to Peekskill, and that's where it intersects with a much larger fault that runs down to the Philadelphia area, which is called the Ramapo Fault.
Okay. So, and not only that, but then subsequently a report that we've actually spoken about on this show that came out from MSNBC that suggested that the reactor 2, I think, one of these reactors is actually, of the entire nation, at the most risk of quake damage. If there were to be a quake, which we should say, I mean, not to scare everybody, but is a pretty low possibility.
Well, the reactor that they were talking about is Indian Point Unit 3,
right,
which is the southernmost reactor.
The one that's off.
The one that is off, I believe, as we speak today. It entered a refueling outage on March 8th, approximately. These refueling outages happen roughly every 23, 24 months, so that the fuel, the spent fuel that is in the reactor, can be offloaded and moved to the spent fuel pools, and new, fresh fuel can be added to the reactor. But my understanding is that right now that unit 3 is offline.
So what is the legal, aside from being able to weigh in on the relicensing effort, I mean, what is the legal responsibility of the Attorney General's office, and how far can you go in terms of, if you really believed that this is a danger and should not be relicensed, how far could the Attorney General's office go?
Well, the Attorney General's office has been vigorously participating in this relicensing proceeding, and has raised a number of contentions, roughly 37, I believe, at last count. Many of those have been admitted for litigation. A number of them were not admitted for litigation, including the seismic concerns or contentions in agency parlance that we talk about. The seismic concerns were not admitted.
Okay, so does that mean but the issue as of today is not dead, in other words, because the Attorney General is saying, okay, in light of all that's happened, you should reconsider your decision to make that dead?
Absolutely. It is certainly not dead, and the Attorney General today took a direct approach, asking the process really to be opened up. It is, as we've discovered, it's been a very narrow process. Perhaps issues that your viewers might think from a common sense perspective should be examined, such as emergency evacuation, earthquake risk, things of that nature, are really not examined in the license renewal proceeding.
So what is examined then?
It is a very small scope, and it's intended to be a small scope by the federal regulator and the industry. They were, when they promulgated the regulations, they were trying to ensure that it was a very narrow review.
Well, because they've actually never said no. Is that correct?
That is correct. There have been roughly 60 plus or minus plants that have received an extension of their operating licenses for an additional 20 years, and not a single plant that has applied for a license renewal has been denied.
Okay. So if it happened in this instance, and there are some people, there are some strong allies. Obviously, the governor is on board. He was the state attorney general prior to Eric Schneiderman. He also tried to block the relicensing. This is a very long process, by the way.
It is a long process. It's a technical process. And you asked before, what is the Attorney General's role? One of the roles that we fulfill, or hopefully that we fulfill on behalf of the citizens of the state, is to present first-class litigation of issues, not only with the other Assistant Attorneys General that we have in the office, but the experts that we are looking at. And indeed, I believe that this proceeding has the most number of legal issues or technical issues that has ever been reviewed by the NRC in a facility licensing proceeding. So we're trying very hard.
Is that why it's taking so long? I mean, now their licenses don't run out until for a couple of years yet, 2013 and 2015
That's
for those
correct.
two reactors. So, but what I mean, is that why it takes this long?
We would submit that what's taken so long thus far has been the quality of the initial application that was prepared by the owner of the facility, and the fact that we have been diligent in examining that application and examining what the federal regulator's staff has been doing from an environmental perspective. And we have raised contentions where we have been able to all along the process, which we are certainly entitled to do. And again, I would come back that this process or this proceeding perhaps is the most hard-fought proceeding of all throughout the country.
You know, it's also, look, Entergy, which is the owner of this plant, has said, in terms of the seismic, and which is what we're focused on at this moment, and as you've noted, there are other issues, there are other questions in terms of their application. Here, however, on the seismic question, they say, look, it's safe. It's built to withstand a quake of up to a 6.1 magnitude. There hasn't been one of that magnitude. There was one, I believe, and we were speaking off camera before, in the 80s, is that correct?
Yes,
there was
in
one?
Westchester County.
And it was not, it was four
It was
magnitude?
in the neighborhood of 4.
Okay, so it's unlikely, and the magnitude of the Japan quake was very much higher. So Entergy says it's safe, A, and B, you know, they believe that the plant is operating as it should be, and also is providing power that can't be provided anywhere else.
Well, that is what Entergy says, but what they are essentially saying is the review of seismic risk that was done back in the 70s is good enough. Their application, which was called an updated safety analysis report, contained data from late 1970s and the early 1980s. And we submit that using the adjective updated is certainly a misnomer for that. We had been able to identify even documents from the NRC, the federal regulator, that showed that there was increased risk. We also had the experts from Columbia University, their expert seismologists, who have vast experience, who said that that the understanding of the seismic hazards for the lower Hudson River Valley had changed since the 1970s, and that what we're asking for is a common sense request. Please look at the new data. Please factor it in when you make this momentous decision as to whether or not you're going to allow these facilities to operate for another 20 years.
And then the question of the 2,000, give or take, megawatts of energy that is provided to the city and the surrounding area in Westchester County needs to be replaced in some way, and that also factors into the consideration of the Attorney General's office?
Yes, it does. And we have raised concerns about that as well. One of the legal issues that we're pursuing is that the federal regulator's analysis of alternatives is deficient, is wholly deficient, and doesn't really take the hard look at alternatives, specifically energy alternatives.
Well, we are going to be following this issue, and I want to thank you very much, John Sipos, because I find it fascinating in a wonky sort of way. So I appreciate it, and we will be talking more about it in the future. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much.